Mary's Little Donkey. Story by Gunhild Sehlin. Illustrations by Sehlin Mueller. Long, long ago, a little donkey lived in Nazareth, in the Holy Land. He was very lazy and very dirty because no one groomed him, but he moved very beautifully. He lived with lots of other donkeys in a rich man's stable. The other donkeys teased him for being so untidy, but he always held his head high. Just wait, he thought to himself. I'll show you all some day. One morning, as the donkeys were fetching water from the town well, a young woman named Mary came up and patted the little donkey. "What a beautiful donkey," she said. "It's a pity you're so dirty." From that day on, the lazy donkey often saw Mary at the well. She was always friendly and stroked him. Mary was often tired after carrying water home. Her husband Joseph sighed. "If only I could afford to buy a donkey to help you," he said. From then on, Joseph got up before it was light and worked extra hard all day long in his carpenter's workshop. Slowly but surely, he saved some money, but he didn't tell Mary. It was going to be a surprise. Finally, Joseph had enough money to buy a donkey from the rich man, but he could only afford the laziest, dirtiest donkey. When Joseph tried to lead the donkey home, it dug its hooves firmly into the ground. When Joseph managed to push the donkey to the top of some steps, it slid back down again. "Mary will have more trouble than help with this beast," he thought sadly. "I've bought you a donkey, Mary," said Joseph when they finally arrived home. "But it's a lazy, dirty beast." "Did you say lazy?" Mary asked eagerly. She hurried outside. "Oh, Joseph, this is just the donkey I wanted. Thank you." Mary groomed the donkey until he shone. "You are a very special donkey," she said. "It's not your fault that nobody groomed you." "This is where you'll sleep," Mary said, leading the donkey to the stable. "Now eat and have a good rest." The friendly sheep and goats who lived there welcomed the little donkey. "I'll never leave here," the donkey decided, and he fell asleep happily. "He really does look handsome now," Joseph marveled the next morning. "But you'll have trouble when you go to get water. He's very stubborn." "Will you please make him a yoke that fits well?" Mary asked. Joseph measured the donkey and made him a smooth, comfortable wooden harness. The little donkey had never worn a yoke that didn't rub and hurt him. Mary walked happily through the narrow, winding streets of Nazareth with her little donkey. "What a beautiful donkey!" said the women at the well. Mary filled the water pails and fastened them to the yoke. The little donkey went carefully and precisely, step by step, all the way home. He didn't spill a drop. When they got home, Mary led the little donkey out into the meadow where the other animals were grazing. "Thank you for helping me, my little donkey," she said. Today, the oldest sheep had a secret to share. She drew a deep breath and began to speak, but her voice was drowned out by a flock of chirping, twittering birds. Many of the birds of Nazareth had come to hear the secret too. When the birds quietened down, the sheep told them all. "Mary's going to have a baby." All the animals were very happy to hear the news because they loved Mary so much. The little sheep and goats gobbled and danced. The birds sang a new song, and the grasshoppers chirruped. The donkey gave a loud, happy cry, "Hee-haw!" Even a snake came to celebrate, and the other animals weren't afraid. One windy morning, a messenger knocked loudly on the door and told Joseph to go to Bethlehem immediately. "But the baby could be born any day," said Mary. "I'm worried too, Mary," Joseph said gently. "But the emperor has ordered that we go to be counted." "At least we have our little donkey," said Mary. "He can carry all our things and even carry me when I get tired." Mary packed some food and a shawl and clothes she had made for the baby. She said goodbye to the animals. "Take good care of Mary and her baby," the animals urged the little donkey. "I promise I will," replied the donkey. Joseph lifted Mary into the saddle. She wrapped herself tightly in her shawl, and they set out for Bethlehem. It was a long way from Nazareth to Bethlehem. Some days it poured with rain, and some days the sun shone. Soon Mary, Joseph, and the little donkey came to a stream that had burst its banks after heavy rain. "We'll have to wait until the water goes down," said Joseph. "But that could take days." Suddenly the little donkey began to trot along the riverbank and plunged into the rushing water. He was following an angel, which neither Joseph nor Mary could see. "Stop, stop, donkey!" shouted Joseph. But the donkey waded on through the water to the opposite bank. He had found a safe way across. Joseph rushed after him and reached the other side just as safely. "Mary!" he cried. "Were you frightened?" "Frightened?" Mary asked in surprise. "Why should I be frightened? The angel of God was guiding the donkey, even though I couldn't see him." "Maybe you're right," said Joseph anxiously. One afternoon, the travelers were resting under a fig tree when the air was suddenly filled with bird song. A flock of birds had settled in the tree and were singing with all their heart. "How happy they sound," Mary said. "Can you hear them singing about our child?" Joseph laughed. "How do you know that?" "I just know," Mary smiled. "But Joseph, haven't you noticed? They're our birds." "Our birds?" "They're the birds from our garden in Nazareth. Aren't they, my little donkey? They are coming with us to welcome the baby." "Hee-haw!" agreed the donkey. One evening, as darkness fell, Joseph was afraid that they would have to sleep outside. "Don't worry, Joseph," Mary said. "I believe that God will help us." She had hardly spoken these words when the donkey saw the angel, which guided them towards a nearby village. Joseph knocked at the door of the first house, and they were invited in to stay. In the morning, they were all awakened by happy bird song. "Our birds have come with us," Mary told their hosts, "to welcome our child into the world." "This must be a very special child," said the mother. The family's children helped Joseph to groom the little donkey, and they gave him hay and water. Then they traveled a little way with Mary and Joseph and took turns riding on the donkey's back. They had never had so much fun. One afternoon, the wind whipped up and it started to rain heavily. It was soon completely dark, and the travelers had to find shelter. Once more the donkey saw an angel, which led them to a rickety hut. Inside, 3 men were sitting around a fire. From the way they looked and winked at each other, Joseph quickly guessed that they were robbers. Mary shared her bread with the robbers and told them that an angel had guided them to the hut, and the chief robber listened in awe. Then she told them about the birds of Nazareth who were sleeping in the rafters, and the second robber stared up at the happy birds like a man bewitched. Next, Mary showed them the tiny clothes she had made for her baby. The youngest robber was ashamed, supposing he had stolen this little bundle. They all slept quietly through the night, and next morning the birds of Nazareth sang for 3 happy men who decided they would never steal again. The following evening, a group of shepherds welcomed Mary, Joseph, and the little donkey. They made Mary a small, warm tent from goat skins. "Can I look after the donkey?" a boy called Reuben asked eagerly. He gave the little donkey hay and water, stroked him, and spoke to him. He took off his own cloak and spread it over the donkey's back. Joseph talked with the shepherds for a long time. The old grandfather told him that the shepherds had been waiting and waiting for a new king. "He will lead all people along God's path," said Reuben. "And I think he's coming soon." "Why do you think that?" Joseph asked. "Because the stars are shining so brightly tonight. You can almost hear them singing, 'Soon, soon, soon.'" At long last they reached Bethlehem. "Thank you, my wonderful little donkey," said Mary. "Hee-haw," the donkey cried, but he was exhausted. Joseph knocked at the door of every inn, but no one had any room. The birds of Nazareth chirped, "Come, come, little donkey." He pricked his ears, lifted his head, and saw the angel standing in a doorway. A big star was shining over the building, which looked very splendid. But when they reached it, Mary and Joseph saw that it was just a plain old stable. "A stable!" Mary cried in delight. "This is perfect. We are much too dirty and dusty to stay in a fine house." The stable's owner was waiting at the door. He had heard unusual bird song in the dark night and seen the bright star. He saw the donkey carrying Mary and Joseph, bathed in starlight. "Here come the king and queen I have dreamt about," he thought. Aloud he said, I only have this old stable." "Nothing would please us more," Joseph replied. When the little donkey woke the next morning, he saw Mary surrounded by angels, holding a tiny baby. Mary laid the child gently in a manger. What lovely cheeks he had! How warm and soft! He had eyes like an angel. Then the shepherds knocked at the door. They kneeled in front of the manger, and the old shepherd began to tell their story. "We saw an angel last night who told us our new king would be born today in Bethlehem, and that we'd find a baby lying in a manger. So we came to Bethlehem and saw the star shining over this stable. Our king is here at last." Reuben laughed joyfully. When the shepherds left, Mary, Joseph, and the baby slept. The little donkey stood by the manger, guarding the child. At sunrise the next day, the birds of Nazareth began to sing their happy song. "Thank you, little birds," said Mary. The little donkey said to them, "Now fly back home and tell the lambs and goats that Mary and her baby are safe and well. Hee-haw!" The birds chirped goodbye and flew north towards Nazareth. And Mary's little donkey settled down happily to watch over his new family. No matter what happened, he would look after them.